it was kind of my light bulb moment where I realized, yeah, like if I'm going to work so hard and do this thing that I love to do, like why not do it for myself? And a couple months later, I ventured out on my own, and my agency, which is now Hite, formerly known as Sparrow, was born.
Hi, everybody. This is Josh Becerra. Welcome to this next episode of How I Work. I'm super excited to have a guest today, Molly Lopez. Molly's a nationally recognized technology forward digital marketing expert, more than 12 years of experience working in social media, content marketing, paid digital advertising, SEO, and more. Molly, you founded your own digital marketing agency in 2019 with a mission of bringing big agency marketing services to companies for more efficient prices. I love that. And after scaling that agency to 7 figures in under 3 years, you made the decision to merge with Hite Digital and are now the owner partner of Hite Miami office. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Josh. I'm so excited to be here and having an awesome conversation with another agency owner.
Yeah. Well, let's get right into it. So, yeah, you and I both built agencies. So, tell the listeners a little bit about that story. I kind of recapped it quick, but what did you do prior to starting your agency, and then what made you decide to jump in and build your own?
Yeah, so it's funny, and whenever I tell this story, I use this anecdote because I think that, either maybe I was delusional or my coworkers always used to ask me like, "Hey, when are you going to start, your own agency?" Or even, some of my clients when I worked in other agencies. I'm kind of an OG agency gal. I've been in the agency game for a long time. If you're in the agency world, you know that it's a grind, it's long hours, it's super competitive, it's fast paced, it can really wear you out fast. And so I would always say, I can barely survive working in an agency, let alone owning one. I will never start my own agency.
Yeah.
So be careful what you put out into the universe because, fast forward and voila, here I am. So
Yeah.
the process for me honestly came about because I had sort of hit a ceiling at the agency that I was at. I knew that I wasn't happy in my role anymore. And, I was burning the candle at both ends, working 70 hours a week,
Oh my gosh.
and, thought about going in house somewhere, doing the corporate thing, taking on a director or VP role at,
Yeah.
a big corporation. And it just didn't sit right with me. I didn't think I wanted to kind of slow down that much at that point in my career. And as I was sitting at my desk one day, I kind of just had the thought, if I could just service one client, just one of the clients in my portfolio, of 7 or 8 clients that I was managing at the time, I could support myself and I could do everything that I'm doing right now, in this big fancy agency office
Yeah.
from my couch with my laptop. And that's really all that I would need. And so it was kind of my light bulb moment where I realized, yeah, like if I'm going to work so hard and do this thing that I love to do, like why not do it for myself? And a couple of months later, I ventured out on my own, and my agency, which is now Hite, formerly known as Sparrow, was born.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome, and it takes a lot to make that step, but you did it, and obviously we're successful at it. I think I cringe kind of every time I hear people say they work 70-hour weeks and things like that. At Agurian, where our agency, we are definitely not on that train. I think that's like a recipe for disaster. Um, but there's a lot of things I want to touch on with you about building kind of strong, sustainable, scalable agencies. So one of the things you and I talked about was, whether you bring on business partners or you don't. So let's start with your thoughts on like how you wrestled with that question a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. So early on in my journey as an agency owner, I started kind of scanning the horizon for potential business partners. I realized really fast that it was really lonely to be a business owner
Yeah.
and be a solo business owner. And as much as I could talk to my friends, many of them entrepreneurs in their own right, as much as I could talk to, my husband or my mom about the struggles that I was going through trying to build this agency, at the end of the day, it's such a unique beast, a marketing agency. I was really isolated and didn't feel that I had other agency owners to go to for advice.
Yeah.
Both of the agencies that I had worked at previously, even though I left on fairly good terms with my bosses, they both kind of viewed me now as their competition. And so it
Sure.
wasn't really like, it was amicable, but not in the sense that I viewed them kind of as mentors who could kind of take me under their wing. So I think just kind of out of my sense of loneliness and like I want somebody to do this with because I want a teammate, started looking for business partners, and I actually met a guy in my MBA program at the time who ended up coming on to be my first business partner.
Yeah.
And he stayed on with us for about a year, but he didn't come from an agency background. He came from an in-house marketing background, and it was just really a huge jump for him to go from being an in-house marketer to not only being in the agency world, but being like an owner and like building an agency. And it really just wasn't the right fit. And that was a hard lesson for me. We actually ended up having to kind of sit down with him and tell him that we needed to let him go, which
Yeah.
I felt absolutely terrible about, especially because I had a personal relationship with this guy as well. He was a friend. He just
Sure.
wasn't the right partner for me as a founder and to build my agency. And I think, you know, I had initially based the partnership off of, oh, you work in marketing, you're super nice, we get along so well, like you're in between jobs right now. I'm desperate for some help and some companionship on this entrepreneur journey. Like, hey, come do this thing with me. But yeah, it didn't end up working out. A little bit later on, I had another friend who did have an agency background, who is actually still one of my best friends to this day. And she was also kind of in between jobs during COVID. And, my other partner had just left, and I was like,
Sure.
hey, come on in. We have this void. Like, I really actually need somebody like you. And, I'll give you equity if you, do X, Y, and Z and kind of come on in the COO role. And she did a fantastic job, and she was certainly qualified for the role. But after about, I think, 6 or 7 months, she came to me and kind of had a conversation of, hey, I love what you're doing here, but this is not really what I want to be doing. And
Yeah.
she actually ended up going into big tech. So after that, I had kind of, brought on and then paid out and let go of two partners. I really had to kind of sit down with myself and realize that, you know, finding a business partner is not as simple as, I, I'm looking for a good analogy here, finding someone to like play tennis with on the weekends. Like,
Yeah.
it is really, when you're committing to building a business, you're committing a huge amount of your life, your time, your money, your energy. And for, you as a founder, like it's your baby and it's your vision and you're going to be 110% committed to it. And I think that, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, but I think it's really hard to find someone after you've already started something who is going to come in and kind of rally behind you with the same amount of gusto and commitment that a partner should have in a business.
Yeah.
Versus like, it's different. I think if it's like, two or three people that have the idea collectively at the same time and kind of like start from the same place, like I think
Yeah.
that's a little bit easier to kind of build synchronicity with.
Yeah. Yeah. My experience with partnership has been a little bit different in that, like, I don't know, it kind of defies convention a little bit, but basically, two of my best friends from my childhood. So Colin, I've known since we were 5 years old, and Zach since we were 7. We all decided to get into business together. Not even as an agency. We did a startup first, and that startup failed, and that's when Colin was like, I think there's something to this digital marketing thing, and this was back in like 2008, and so we kind of taught ourselves how to do it, and just kind of hustled for clients and figured it out and started growing. And so it came from a place of like um, real like relationship and trust, and kind of we just made this commitment to one another that we just wanted to do things together. Like we just wanted to build companies together, and so that's um, been able to sustain us, as partners. And over the years, we've brought in other people, to on the team and to participate in part at a partner level. Um, but I think that thread still holds true. Is like it's really about deep, meaningful relationships and doing things together. Um, so my experience is probably a little bit weird and out of the ordinary and unique when it comes to partners. But I appreciate hearing your experience, and I do believe that it is really hard, and finding people who have the same level of commitment and gusto, as you said, is not easy. I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about niching. So I was actually in a LinkedIn thread, and I put my own thoughts in there. Somebody was asking, like, what do you think about niching or not niching? So I'd be curious your thoughts on that when it comes to agency. Do you niche? Do you not niche? What's your experience been?
Yeah, this is such a hot topic, and I
Yeah.
feel that most of kind of the agency like gurus out there will all say the same thing and say, niche, 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 niche to scale. If you're niche down, it's easier to grow. And there's a lot of truth to that, but there's also good arguments to be made on the other side of the fence. So in my past life as an agency gal, I worked for a niched agency that was niched down and focused exclusively on consumer products. And then I also worked for an agency that didn't have a niche and was very diverse in terms of its industry focus. So when I founded Sparrow, honestly, I wasn't sure whether I wanted to niche or not. And I became diversified pretty quickly, just purely out of necessity and, the opportunistic mindset that I had when I started out. I was getting referrals from people who had healthcare practices, and then I was getting referrals from people who owned, hair salons. So
Right.
I had experience in a wide variety of industries. So I was familiar with many different types of things, which kind of allowed me to parlay that into, oh yeah, of course we can help you with this and we can help you with that. So I was actually talking a couple of months ago with a pretty well-known agency founder who's scaled his agency. I'm not sure to what in gross revenue, but it's a nationally recognized agency, and he has not niched down. They are multi-industry.
Right.
And the analogy that he used to explain to me was, I kind of view it a little bit like investing, right? You want to have a diversified portfolio so that if real estate tanks, your stocks are still good, and vice versa. And I think, especially here in South Florida, we experienced that during the pandemic, where a lot of agency owners that I know here are niched down into the hospitality space. There's
Sure.
cruise lines,
Tourism.
hotels,
Yeah.
tourism is massive here. And during the pandemic, as soon as tourism shut down, these agencies had, to lay people off and yada yada. Whereas we grew during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I think that was beneficial to us. So we've stayed diversified. We certainly have industries that we like and that we gravitate towards, and that we focus our kind of proactive business development efforts on. But 9 times out of 10, we are not going to turn a client away because of their industry. We're pretty well equipped to handle just about anything that you can throw at us. So it's
Yeah.
served us well to be diversified.
Yeah, that's been my experience too. Like when we got into COVID, there were some other agencies here in the Twin Cities that were really focused on like trade shows or what have you. And because of our kind of diversity of clients, we weathered it and actually grew as well, right? So I think there's things to be said for both, but we haven't had a lot of trouble growing, even though we don't have a niche. So another topic is, I know we're both super passionate about talent and attracting the right talent, building trust with our teams, retaining our teams. Um, Tell me, like, what is it about talent that you're so passionate about? What have you done to ensure kind of that you have that great agency culture?
Yeah, such a good question. So I think that it helped me tremendously having the perspective of somebody who had worked at multiple agencies. So I had all types of supervisors, all types of bosses, two very different work cultures, both of which had some pros and some cons. So I had kind of a clear idea of what I didn't want to do and what I did want to do with my own agency, and what I wanted that culture to look like.
Yeah.
And you mentioned like the 70-hour work weeks. And, that's something that I still experience from time to time as the founder and the agency owner, but I would never let it stand for, one of my employees to put that kind of time into my business. Like
Yeah.
that is, I strongly agree with you and feel that like that is an owner's level of commitment. And if you're not getting paid as an owner, I would never expect you to put that much time into the business. So we kind of had four core values that we aligned around that I have truly tried to incorporate into the agency culture. The first one is be kind, which unfortunately had not always been my experience with coworkers or clients in my past agencies. So we have kind of a strict no assholery policy, and I
Good
have fired
policy.
clients before for harassing my team members. I have let other team members go for that policy. So it's very strict because I feel those kinds of things create negativity very quickly. So
Mhm.
be kind is one of our values. Honesty is the only policy. We're extremely transparent. One thing that I do with my team is on a monthly basis, we have a meeting to review all of our financials together.
Mhm.
The team can see exactly how much of the company's revenue is going to salaries versus office space versus, manager salaries, which is not something that I ever had at my previous agencies. It was just
Yeah.
kind of very hush hush and in the dark. Our other value is pick up the phone. So basically, just like keep it an open line of communication. If you have an issue or frustration, like come to me, come to your manager, go to whoever the person is. So we are really big on communication. And the last one is work to live, don't live to work. So again, going back to work life balance, I definitely feel that uh, our experience as humans is so much more than what we do Monday through Friday, and really try to instill that in my team. I'm not friends with any of them on social media. If you want to tell me about your weekend, great, but there's a lot of company cultures, I think, that stress like, oh, we're a family and we're all best friends, and like while that the intention is like good, right? It's like, no, we're actually not your family. Like, we're your coworkers. We're going
Yeah.
to be friends. That's fine. But like, you have a real family outside of work. Like, that's your family. That's where your first obligation is. Like, that's where your real life as a human being is. You're not going to be at this company forever. So, yeah, those kind of four principles are what we've tried to build our culture on.
Yeah, I love that. And like, I spent a number of years in South America, and one of the big learnings that I came back with, looking at like the way that culture operates and the way the culture in the U.S. operates, is, yeah, people down there kind of work to live. They work, they have a career, but it isn't what is their identity or what defines them, and they just use the money that they make from work to go and have a lot of fun with their friends and family, and like are dedicated to that as a resource. Whereas here you get a lot more of this kind of um, living for your work, and your career is your entire identity, and like all of everything is so wrapped up in like the success of where we are in our career. So Totally aligned with a lot of that.
Yeah, yeah, that's so true. I think about that, and I notice that too when I travel. Is, for us in the US, even like at a networking event, or, you meet someone on the train or wherever, first question you normally ask is, well, what do you do? Like, what do you do for work?
Yes.
And that's not the first question, in other countries that they'll ask you about. It's like one of the last things they care about.
Yeah.
They don't care if you're a stockbroker or the garbage man. And it's really refreshing. And so that's something like I've noticed as well going to my husband's actually from Guatemala, so Latin America or even like European countries. I feel like Italy, Spain, they have much more of that like balanced type of culture, and I've tried to check myself a little bit more in those situations instead of like jumping right to, oh yeah, tell me what you do for work,
Yeah. Business, business,
asking about,
business.
right, like what are your hobbies, what do you enjoy doing, like, what movies have you seen lately? It is anything of trying to like retrain my brain because we're so in that mindset.
I know. Yeah, it is. It is definitely a mindset, and it takes practice and a shift and like dedication to try to pull yourself out of that. I experience it that way too. So, lastly, we alluded to this a little bit earlier in the conversation, but like running agencies can take a toll on you as an entrepreneur. So, do you have any advice, like strategies or habits that you use to kind of sustain or yourself or maintain your mental health when you're kind of in this?
Yeah, wine and Prozac. No. Um, but in all seriousness, it is really demanding, right? Like what I said before I started my agency kind of was true. Like it's hard to work in an agency and it's even harder to run one. Now you're not only trying to keep all your clients happy, you're trying to keep your team happy, you're trying to keep the lights on.
Yeah.
You're trying to provide for yourself. It's a million different hats. One thing that really helped me is after about a year, I started looking into finding a therapist, coach type person
Sure.
who specialized in working with entrepreneurs. And I was really lucky. I found an amazing woman here in Florida who specializes in mental health therapy for specifically entrepreneurs. So even though she herself wasn't an agency owner, she had dedicated kind of her practice to working with unique challenges that entrepreneurs have. And so it was extremely helpful to kind of have somebody truly, for the first time, I feel like I could talk to someone who really understood what the weight of running a business felt
Yeah,
like on my shoulders.
for sure.
Yeah, and that was a really really helpful thing for me, especially kind of at that during those first couple of years for sure.
Yeah.
And definitely, I'm not perfect now, but definitely in a much better place with it. I think the other things that help me are one, I think social media is so great. Obviously, we're digital marketers. We
Right.
have
We
to be
love
on
it.
these platforms. We love it, right? We're running ads, we're doing all these things. I'm probably spending hours a day on the platform, but I think social media can also be a really toxic place for entrepreneurs. Where maybe you're seeing other people posting about how they had $1 million sales day, or doubled their revenue this year. And, people aren't shy about kind of putting their best of the best stuff
Yeah.
out there. And
The
I
hustle
think
culture of
the hustle
entrepreneurism
culture,
is super toxic.
exactly. And I think that it's a big temptation to kind of compare where you're at with other people and, think like, oh, wow, well, that guy only started 2 years ago and already he has a business that's twice as big as mine. Or,
Yeah.
and you kind of can put yourself down in a sense or feel less than. So I think it's important to kind of stay in your lane and try to put blinders on as much as possible, and like you said, right, like create a life for yourself. Like what is like your ultimate goal with the business, and it's not going to be what the person next to you is trying to build,
Yeah.
or the person on the internet. It's what you're trying to build. And so really kind of having that you versus you mentality and not being distracted or discouraged by what else you're seeing out there, I think is really important.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate your answer, the high degree of vulnerability and just sincerity and like talking about that. I definitely have experienced a lot of those things as well. And I do think that, it's good to kind of remind yourself that just like, social media is toxic for, body image and other things, this hustle culture of entrepreneurism that exists, it's kind of fake. Like, yeah, maybe those things do happen, but those people also might be really like, hurting inside. They may have like other issues that's just not coming to the forefront. So it's great that we as agency owners can like talk about the fact that like this is hard and that sometimes we do need help and it's okay to like ask for that help and we don't always have to pretend like we're perfect. I make mistakes every single day and all I try to do is like own them in front of the team and like do a better job, get up and do a better job the next day. It's all we can really do is have that grace with ourselves. So anyway, I appreciate your answer.
Yeah, absolutely. And the funny thing is that I feel that that actually builds, being able to be vulnerable or like owning your mistakes to your team. It actually builds more trust in the long run. A lot of times we think like, oh my gosh, they're gonna think that their boss is a total mess or their boss doesn't know what's going on and then they're going to feel insecure, like lose trust. And
Yeah.
honestly, I've found like every time I've kind of done that and come to the plate and been like, this is on me, guys. I've really messed this up. I almost feel like the team has like leaned in more and, it's ended up building like more trust, where I was concerned, that it would make them distrust me because
Yeah.
they're not going to have that perception of me as perfect anymore. But in reality, they were able to like see me more as just, a human and someone who's going to be honest with me, and I feel included and I feel, like on the same level. So
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. I love all of that. So I think that's a good place for us to end, talking about just kind of the fact that in the end, agency owners are also humans. And, we have our own insecurities, we have our own kind of hang-ups, we have our own heartbreaks, and that's okay. Like we can own that, and we can also like because of that, because we're willing to kind of own that and share that, we can build trusting, great, strong teams. And the people who like don't like that about us, those are the a-holes, right? Those are the people who we don't want on our teams anyway. So I've really appreciated this time. It's been a great conversation, Molly. Thanks for being here today.
yes, no, thank you so much for having me on. And yeah, it's so fun to meet and connect with other awesome people in the space that are building as well and understand the journey. So thanks for opening up this space for me to join you. It's been awesome.
Thanks so much. All right, everybody, that's it for this episode of How I Work. Thanks. Bye.